Rincon. Omar comes from UC Berkeley, and he's actually in Washington, D.C. He's here to give you a special broadcast of the election recap from Washington, D.C., of what happened throughout this week. So Omar's now coming to the screen. Omar, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about what the feelings were out in D.C. from the start to the finish. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, as the election come up, the day before we saw a lot of heavy machinery equipment installing steel fence as well as bringing concrete barriers to protect the White House. Just waiting for the results and not knowing where this election was going to take place. Um,
You
yeah,
know, I
so
think, Omar, going a little bit on that first night on Tuesday, uncertainty was just in the air all across the country. I think Americans from both sides of the party were just unsure about what would happen. I think more so on the Democratic side, as we saw that the red wave was pretty much sweeping the nations, as a copy and paste effect was just pretty much happening, where it looked like the 2016 electoral map was just getting placed right on top of the 2020 map on that election day. And I think a lot of people went to bed thinking that if you were on the Republican side, Donald Trump would be the elected winner in the morning, and if you were going to bet on the Democratic side, that Joe Biden would be losing. But I think that next morning, when everyone woke up, it was still continuing, and the uncertainty and the anxiety from many Americans just continued to rise and continue to. It was just consistent. It never really ended, and I don't think that this election week, emphasis on week, not even a single day, it just really sapped a lot of people's attention, energy, and it just was a lot. I think specifically looking at DC at that time, I'm assuming that it must have been pretty interesting to see how people reacted on that Tuesday night compared to Saturday night. I would when President-elect Joe Biden was pretty much won the candidacy, but on Tuesday night it was a completely different story. The red mirage was in full force, and fear was pretty much spiraling throughout the nation. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Did you see any people being really anxious? Could you tell that there was kind of more of a disturbance among the community that was out there?
No, that's definitely right. During the whole week from Tuesday to Friday, the demonstrations didn't really stop. But still, the environment and the feeling on the people really did change from the moment that it from Friday to Saturday. Once that the results were more clear, as you say, a lot of anxiety in the people. You can see the demonstrations in nature were kind of like not knowing where things were because of the results were really unclear, and we didn't really saw the election turning late until late in the week, late Friday, Saturday morning. So I think that really pick up in people how they were participating in these demonstrations. During the week, people was just chanting things for against Trump and not really knowing what was next to happen. But once the results came up, it just completely swift. In the morning on Saturday, cars everywhere were sounding, and you can also hear a lot of people chanting. Everyone really came out with their flags from Joe Biden. People just started to come in a more positive manner, in a more happy way, really. And this was reflected in the crowds. You can even see from morning to night, people was just partying in outside the White House. There was a lot of there was alcohol involved. A lot of people was drinking in the street, and nobody really seemed to care. And it's even interesting to say that, because I must say that by Saturday the police presence was minimal compared to the days before. So you could see really that how even the authorities really saw a difference in the environment that was feeling in that night.
From when you were in DC on the ground on the day of Saturday when everything was called, people were out in celebration. I'm pulling up those to the screen now. Omar, can you tell us a little bit about some of the most memorable moments
But yeah, it was something that the community was aware that the necessity of keeping social distancing and keeping everyone mask on, regardless of whatever was going on in the streets.
Right. No, it completely makes sense. I think when I was doing coverage on that night too, I was working with a group or with a team from HAPS that was in Arizona, and they were covering an entire protest happening at the ballot processing plant there from the Trump Republican Party, and specifically the amount of people that were there was a lot, and out of a lot of those people, many of them weren't wearing masks. You could see a few people scattered here and there, but actually a lot of those people were actually journalists covering the protest as well. So it was really interesting, and I think when we had some of our correspondents from HAPS going out and talking to and interviewing people, a lot of these people were just saying, "Oh yeah, COVID's really big," but they understood how important COVID was and how deadly it can be. But I think their words just didn't match their actions, especially seeing like how close they were, how they didn't really care to wear a mask, and that was just something that I really took note of. We also had a lot of people accuse the Democratic Party of going out in these early celebrations and these large gatherings already when President-elect Biden was announced as the winner, and that or projected to be the winner, my apologies. And they claimed that a lot of these Democrats weren't wearing masks. But I think, just talking with you, Omar, here right now, and seeing from your video in Washington, D.C., with what looks like to be thousands of people, a lot of them were wearing masks. So I think that it's really interesting to see the compare and contrast between these two different communities of people. Kind of moving to this last photo that you have here that's right above us. This is Saturday night. This is, I believe you said this is the celebration. What kind of energy were you feeling from this very moment? And is this a celebration, a hurrah? And do you think this hurrah was too soon?
I mean, it definitely felt a lot of relief on the crowd. As we were mentioning earlier, there was a lot of tension on the people because the results were really, at first, were not really positive, and at second, they were just coming really slow, and people was just really unsure. So by Saturday, the feelings of the people was just finally a relief of finally having the results and actually having the pictures, right? Let's remember that Washington, D.C. had over 90% of the votes for Joe Biden. So you can imagine the type of crowd that it came to the city. A lot of people was just enjoy, and this was from the morning until late in the night. People just kept celebrating and bringing the people together, really.
I think one of the most important things that we should be looking at is moving in the future and seeing what does this mean for the American people that President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris are now moving their administration forward into the White House and taking over for the next term. What does this mean for America?
Yeah, I think people has not really realized what this really means for America. And in a sense, we have the first woman to be vice president and also the first African American. And I think that's such a meaningful part of this election. People haven't really grounded what this really means for the United States. And in terms for the Democrats, although this was a lot of not the results that the Democrats were expecting with the blue wave, I think it's an opportunity to really rebuild the country. We still have some races coming up to get the Senate. If that is gonna happen, we'll see. But this is an opportunity also for Democrats to really show their power and see if they can get the Senate. But regardless of, I think also Biden has shown that he's willing to work across the aisle, and some Republicans have already expressed the willingness to work across the aisle. Mitt Romney this morning was in a press conference mentioning that Biden wants to work with him, with Republicans and Democrats alike. And I think this is a good opportunity for America to really focus on the issues that have America in this backlash from some time ago and work together towards the better of the people, really.
You know, Omar, before we get a little too far ahead, I wanted to really take a step back and bring up this election map that I have right here. This was screen cap from ABC News, and this demonstrates the current situation that the election is at, because technically the election is still going on. President Trump has not conceded yet, which still means the election is still continuing. There will be recounts in multiple states across the country, and a lot of the Republicans are stating that the are voicing that the lawsuits will still move forward and will get picked up in the Supreme Court, even though they've multiple times now they've been thrown out of the different states, especially in Michigan, where the judge labeled it as just hearsay. With no substantial evidence. Looking at the map, though, specifically, I want to talk a little bit about the number that appears underneath Joe Biden and Donald Trump's names. I know it's a little hard to see up there. Let's
Saturday, I believe.
Right. No, I think one important thing, I want to turn our attention to the chat right now. So Sufficient Village from Reddit posts that popular vote means nothing. There's 68 million people who voted for Trump or more now. Just to clarify, 71 million people have voted for Donald Trump as of right now, and over 75 million people have voted for Joe Biden. Just to give a clarification on that, as you could also see on the map that was just up. I think one big thing is the Electoral College is the system in place that does determine who is the next president. And Sufficient Village is correct in the sense of the popular vote doesn't determine who the next president is, but it does show the allegiances and where the country is leaning. I think, Sufficient Village also brings up a really good point of, a lot of people from both sides of the party do feel like, is the Electoral College still needed? Should it still be there? And I guess bringing that to you, Omar, what do you think? And also for the people who are listening in live right now, what do you guys think about the Electoral College? What's your opinion on that? And Omar, if you'd like to answer that.
I mean, I think the Electoral College has demonstrated that it's not really a democratic system itself, and it's something that we need to really reconsider as a nation that promotes democratic ideals around the world and within ourselves. Is this a really democratic system or not? And that's a conversation that America has to have at some point. But as we are seeing, it's not something that will go away anytime soon. So I guess that Democrats and Republicans have really to work with it. Until now, we will see. But we also are seeing a lot of states across the union moving towards supporting the popular vote and directing their electoral electoral college voters to vote in what the popular vote asked for, and in a way to really diminish the power of this institution of the electoral college. But that definitely is going to take some time, and I think just American people has to keep pushing for a more democratic system for everyone.
Right, no, completely. I think turning our attention a little bit towards, I guess you earlier mentioned that Kamala Harris would be the first woman and I believe dual minority or biracial. My apologies, biracial. A vice president in our nation's history. It's an amazing feat that I think that it shows that we're moving the country in a forward direction. In the last 48 vice presidents that the country has had, there has only been white males. And this is the first time a woman, a person of a black person, and a person of indigenous representation by minor or it has represented the vice president's seat. I think not only is this important coming from recently, right after the Black Lives Matter movement just swept the country over this summer after the death of George Floyd, but also this is important because what's happening is we now have a woman in this a leadership role who can now represent women from all across the country of color of different descent who can now see someone who looks like themselves up there. And no longer is it the time of where people are saying, no honey, this is a man's world, or no, this is men's business, this is man's talk, like don't listen to politics. No, there's actually a woman there to represent women all across the country. And I think we saw that especially represented on Saturday night's acceptance speech from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, when there were many little girls and young women that attended there and were wearing and just donning their Kamala Harris, Joe Biden shirts as they looked in awe at the stage, watching the role model now getting ready to take control of the country. I think also there have been other women that have made big influential movements when it comes to this election. Specifically, I'm thinking about in Georgia with Stacey Abrams creating over 800,000 more helping people create 800,000 more registered voters that from the Democratic side that had not been able to register to vote in the minority community, which, as we can see in the election for the popular vote, that had made a huge impact in Joe Biden getting ahead of Donald Trump and possibly winning Georgia. Georgia still currently isn't officially named or projected to be Joe Biden's victory. But if it is, that will be historical, as both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, in both Barack Obama's two sessions in his campaigns, all of them have not been able to claim Georgia as their own. So for Joe Biden to get this, it's a historical moment, as well as going on to Arizona. If Arizona would move to Joe Biden, that also would be historical. Going off of that, I want to ask you, Omar, what do you think that means for the country that both of these known to be red states would flip to be blue? What does that say about our country, maybe to other nations?
I mean, I think that one of the biggest reason why it turned out is precisely because of the work from many people within the grassroots movement. The work that Stacey Abrams did in Georgia is incredibly admirable and really putting democratic ideals forward, and really empowering minorities across the nation. A lot of people feel that this election specifically was minorities against the people in power. And I think that finally being able to restore the blue wall and bring back the power of these people that has been disenfranchised for so many decades really turned this election around. And it just shows hope for a lot of these communities, especially after especially after an administration like the Trump administration.
No, I think looking a little bit more specifically at Georgia, for what people need to be looking at as we move forward, is the Senate race. This is the race that will be the runoff election for the Senate, and will determine whether or not the Republicans will control the majority of the Senate, or instead will be a split Senate between both the Democrats and the Republicans. Before I go into that specifically, I see Mark Gage from Twitter just kind of left a comment. They live in San Jose, and is Kamala Harris the first state attorney general too? I believe so, Mark. So again, not only is she from has her Oakland roots and from California, she also now is the first biracial and woman vice president. So again, going back into Georgia, now jumping into this with the Senate race that's going to happen on January 5th. This is a race that's going to determine, like I said, whether or not the Republicans are going to control the Senate or not. If they do, that will determine President-elect Joe Biden's first 2 years in office as pretty much a lame duck presidency. In talking with previous political analysis, I've been told that they believe that it's not like he won't be able to get anything done, but it'll just be a much harder and steeper uphill battle that he'll have to do. And I think, going to you, Omar, Joe Biden has said time and time again throughout his entire campaign that his entire campaign was built on his ability to cross the aisle. And you mentioned this earlier in this broadcast as well. Do you think he'll be able to cross the aisle and unite both the Republican and the Democratic parties in the Senate and be able to pass bipartisan bills in the first few years of his time in office?
I think that will really depend on the willingness from Republicans to move forward with an agenda for all Americans. And I think it will happen. McConnell just today announced that that a coronavirus relief bill needed to pass before the new president was sworn in. I think that just shows a little bit about the pressure they're now facing. Mitt Romney also said that Joe Biden was willing to work across the aisle, and I think that just shows how some Republicans are willing to put the work, are willing to really put the American people first and move forward with the issues that we are facing. Because I don't think that we are facing that many different issues. I feel like if anything, we have come to this division because of rhetorics that were just clearly unfounded, racist rhetorics and stuff like that. But I think American people has the same issues: student loans, low wages, need for education, and retrain for a lot of people in different industries. So I think it will all depend it will all be in the hands from the Republicans, especially if they keep controlling the Senate. They will have to really put in retrospect what they want, and because Joe Biden has been really willing since the beginning to work across the aisle, and I think it's something a characteristic from him from across the decades, that he's willing to work with Democrats and with Republicans.
One of the last things I just want to talk about before we end the broadcast for the day is a little bit about the coronavirus. I know this is a huge topic that's currently going on. The nation has had influx of numbers ever since just the summer. This is our second wave, and this is the highest numbers we've ever seen since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. Looking at it, though, half of the country, or at least the world, with especially our own country, can tell we're divided. Many of the states were 50-50, if not 50-49, very small 1-3% number differences, not only just in the presidential election, but in the House and also in the Senate races as well. Because of that, many of the Republicans at least believe that this is a political issue, and that they shouldn't be told the country shouldn't be shut down, and that the COVID isn't as big of a deal, especially after following what President Trump has said, what he's joked around and suggesting, and injecting bleach into your body, and then after getting COVID himself and getting through it, but after the help of a government-funded hospital, and after receiving special treatment that isn't normally open to the public. I think, he made it seem like it wasn't as big of a deal as it really is for the average American person, which I believe the Republican American people really ran with. And unfortunately, the numbers continue to rise, as we saw, like, as I said, in the Arizona broadcast, many people weren't wearing masks, weren't social distancing throughout the entire event. And that just is a very scary thought to think about, that we may be in a pandemic for much longer because a larger portion of the American population won't listen to the advice or the regulations that Joe Biden's administration team might push forward. So my question to you, Omar, is what do you think Joe Biden needs to do in order to unite the country and allow and get both sides on the same page that COVID is not a political issue, it's an issue of just survival?
Well, he's already taking some of the steps. And the first, he announced during his speech that he was going to put a task force with experts and science-based decisions. I think that's one of the it's an important decision to make and important first step. But I think that just the American people has to really come together and really ask ourselves, like, this can be political. This is simply can be political as we are seeing in this country. But I think the Biden administration needs to implement a deep contact tracing program across the nation. If anything, the current crisis has become out of the hands because of the lack of really coordination at a federal level. There's so much that states can do, and you can travel across the states without really any restriction at all. So there is so much that the states can do without losing control of it. And as we're seeing, there's surging cases everywhere across the nation, specifically in Midland states. But I think the first step is being taken by Joe Biden by now. Right now, as president-elect, there's not much he can do. But once that he starts to grab the administration and get more power, he can start to take more decisive decisions and really put into action the resources from the union and from the different agencies that we have.
Omar, I just want to thank you so much for going live and giving us this amazing coverage of what happened in D.C. I think from both the very first day, even before the election day, November 1st, which some of your photos were from, all the way to Saturday night when President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris were projected to become the next winners for this 2020 election. Is there anything else you want to say to your audience today?
No. I mean, it's just, we need to come together as a country and put forward American people and really work in the issues that we have in common rather than focusing in all the division that we have for the last 4 years.
Great. And thank you everyone who tuned in and watched this broadcast. My name is Marco Torres, and then this is my special guest, Omar Rincon. He's a UC Berkeley student out on the ground in Washington, D.C., giving us a coverage recap of what happened in the week of DC during this election week. Thank you again for attending our election recap coverage, and continue to watch us on HAPS as we continue to follow more election coverage and other political coverage throughout the coming months. Thank you again, and good night.
Good night.